Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Devin, Hasson, and David Wolman. It is 9:10 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and gentlemen, we are here to talk about our game of the week, our reader-voted game of the week. Big thank you to everybody who went to our website, starlocalmedia.com, to vote on the 5 games up for selection this week. Devin, they did it again. Was there ever a doubt? It's probably the thing that amazes me most about the Sachse fan base is that, like, the thing with high school sports is that they're cyclical. So it's not like it's been the same people every year who vote for Sachse when they're up for game of the week. But nevertheless, no matter the turnover, man, they always turn out in droves when they're up for consideration in this. And sure enough, their game tonight, 7 o'clock out at Williams Stadium in Garland, Sachse against South Garland. Was there ever a doubt, Devin?
You know, it's not just that they win the vote. It's just usually a landslide as well.
They crush this thing.
Against some really high-profile competition when you look at the other games on this list.
This was, I mean, there's 2 teams that are ranked in the top 11 in the state on this poll too, but Sachse and South Garland got the nod, so that is the game that we will break down as part of this is a zone seeding game in District 9-6A. Sachse, the 2 seed out of Zone A, South Garland, the 3 seed out of Zone B, as part of a bit of an innovative approach that the district took to scheduling this season due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And I kind of want to start there because it's been a week for Garland ISD for District 9-6A. So, like I said, 9:10 a.m. on Thursday. This game is still happening tonight, right?
As of right now, yes.
Because that's pretty dicey ground when you look at the rest of the district so far. So Garland versus Lakeview Centennial, that was originally set to take place tonight. That has been postponed due to the virus. North Garland and Naaman Forest, I guess that's now going to take place later on this month. Obviously, COVID doesn't care how you structured your district schedule. COVID's going to COVID, and sure enough, it has COVIDed all over 9-6A's plans for the week. So what has it just kind of been like having to keep up with just the constant shuffling that has gone on this week, Devin?
Oh, it's been a blast, let me tell you. Especially, you mix in a signing day, the final week of volleyball, a little basketball starting up.
This is probably the busiest week that we've had up to this point this year.
Oh, yeah. I think in the fall it always is, just because, and more so now because of COVID pushing things back. But what I was going to say is that this might not be the most glamorous matchup on our slate, but it might be the most important because this is essentially a playoff game now because of all the COVID and because of the pod system that GISD put in place. Or I shouldn't say GISD, 9-6A, Wiley's in that bunch also. But this was the reason they came up with this pod system was if there was going to be further COVID delays, they wanted a way to go ahead and determine their 4 playoff teams. And so these seeding games are essentially playoff games because the winner of this game will be in the playoffs, assuming they can't figure out the schedule later on down the line. So, it takes on huge importance. But, it's just the dominoes falling, with, Tuesday morning with North Garland having a positive case, and then later that afternoon with Lakeview having the positive case. We won't even get into the following day when Mesquite had a positive case and threw 10-6A all into the schedule, all into, into the air. But it's been a tough situation. This is, again, Rowlett and Wiley both had COVID situations in this district, before the start of district play. That's why Rowlett, we're sitting here going into mid-November, and they played 3 games all season long. But again, that pod system that they developed with the zones, the pods, whatever you want to call them, was unique. It was interesting, but right now it's looking like it's kind of a smart idea in terms of at least they're going to have, hey, we laid this out from the get-go. This is how we're going to determine our playoff teams, whereas you see other districts kind of scrambling to see how we're going to do this with point differential and no contest versus forfeits and, just everything being thrown, to the wind like that.
It's just a big old ice cream headache is what it is. But yes, nevertheless, though, you do have Sachse and South Garland on the docket for tonight. Sachse's been, they've been the subject of our game of the week one other time this year. It was when they played Garland, a game that they went on to win emphatically, 49-27. Things have changed a bit since then. Some uncharted waters for the Mustangs as they enter this game 2-3 on the season, 2-2 in district, an identical record to South Garland. So we can talk a bit about Sachse first, given that's the team that we obviously cover a bit more locally. Again, when they beat Garland, that extended their at the time a winning streak over Garland ISD football teams to 26 consecutive games, and then they've lost 2 straight, one to Rowlett and one to Lakeview Centennial. The game to Rowlett was, so you covered this game, right? Okay, so kind of walk me through just what it was like kind of processing that, because you've seen a number of wild games between Rowlett and Sachse over the years, and I guess it was only a matter of time before one of them finally bounced Rowlett's way. But so nevertheless, though, this was kind of the one that got the ball rolling on this little minor skid that Sachse's in right now. What kind of was the big takeaway from that ball game?
I think it just kind of highlighted some of Sachse's inconsistency on offense. We talked about early in the year when we talked a little bit about Sachse, about their losses on offense, the transfers.
Yeah.
Parker Wells, their quarterback, Sean Coleman to Dallas Christian, their running back, Jay Fair and Jordan Neighbors to Rockwell Heath. Well, that's over 2,000 yards of offense that they expected to have coming back.
Yeah.
And you kind of look around at what those guys are doing now. Sean Coleman is averaging 14 yards of carries for Dallas Christian.
Good Lord.
Yeah, 64 carries, 895 yards.
That's taps for you.
Jay Fair leads the area. He has 46 receptions over at Rockwell Heath. So they had a lot of new parts. And, between the pandemic and just getting a late start, they didn't have a lot of time to kind of work those new pieces together. And you saw it click like he did against Garland with Alex Orgy, another transfer into Sachse rather than out. He was really on that game, but he's been, he's trying to get that rhythm down still, I think, in that new offense. And, against Rowlett was just a steadier team, even though Rowlett was essentially, hadn't played hardly at all. But I think, Rowlett was just able to come out with a more consistent game plan. And this is a rivalry game that's kind of ebbed and flowed. And like I say, the year before it was Sachse who was able to pull out the 2-point win. This year, Rowlett was just able to make enough plays down the stretch to pull out the 2-point win. You think, okay, well, it's a hiccup. But then last week, I think for Sachse, it was a little bit more alarming. Kamar Wheaton, who you kind of wonder what's going on. He's had a couple injuries, and sometimes he only get a handful of touches. But I think he went off for 246 last week, I believe, or something along those lines.
Let's see, the numbers I saw were 22 carries for 264 yards.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's the kind of game that if you just go by recruiting rankings and just kind of the measurables you expect from Kamar Wheaton, and he took it out on Sachse last week, and Lakeview was able to run away with them. And so now, if you look at Sachse, if you look at it on paper, they're in a little bit of a precarious position, both in the zone and overall, because they're 2-2. They're basically tied for 4th place, and for a team again, like you mentioned, that hadn't lost to another GISD team since 2015. Yeah. Now they're sitting on back-to-back losses, and got another GISD team this week.
Yeah, Dad, I just quickly want to rope you in on this because I see you have the box score for that Rowlett Sachse game open. Was there anything looking through those numbers that kind of jumped out at you, trying to kind of put the picture in the frame as to what exactly happened that night?
I don't have a play-by-play here, but just based on the stats right here, it looks like Ernest Thomas made a huge difference in that game. 121 receiving yards and 80 yards on punt returns. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know how much that factored in kind of field position right there. Mm-hmm. But that's one thing I kind of noticed right there as well too. He had 121 receiving yards, and they only had 80. They only averaged 2.4 rushing yards, but they still had a couple touchdowns. And Trey Carr, he completed less than 50% of his passes, but he still managed 3 touchdowns. Mm-hmm. So it looks like it wasn't like the best statistic game, as far as efficiency, but they got the job done whenever they needed to.
And then the following week against Lakeview Centennial, just not a rough one for the Sachse defense. 526 yards allowed, 378 coming on the ground. We mentioned Wheaton, and this is one of the best running backs in the country. So I guess, you mentioned, playing to his paper a bit there. I don't know if they anticipated getting hit for 104 yards on the ground by the quarterback, Michael Hero as well. But it's weird because Sachse had 2 100-plus rushes of their own. Alex Orji and Brian Okoye both went over 100 in that game, but they finished -2 in turnover differential. And despite, obviously moving the ball fairly well on their own, just 13 points in the second half. So, just a very unexpected situation that Sachse finds itself in. I did go back to just to find out, I guess, the last time that they were in a situation like like this. Let's see. So I had the loss to Lakeview. That was the most lopsided loss they've had to a Garland ISD team since 2014, when Rowlett beat them 48-22. And these are the first back-to-back losses to Garland ISD teams that they've had since November of 2010.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, 2010, the last time that South Garland defeated Sachse. So, yeah, I mean, you know, it's trying to figure out just what has happened with Sachse, this team that we're just so used to just kind of lording over Garland ISD and this district in general, is now they find themselves looking to get above 500. With South Garland, it's kind of been the opposite. Like, I guess, I don't know, you know, obviously you've been around the Garland ISD district for some time, so I don't know what expectations were externally for the Colonels coming into this season. But, you know, they're all of a sudden now, after an 0-3 start, they've got 2 straight wins.
Yeah.
They beat the reigning district champion, Wiley, who's, you know, admittedly not the same as they were last year, going through a bit of a transition season. Beat them 35-30. They beat North Garland 27-14. They've already doubled their win total from last year, and the first time they've won multiple district games since 2012. What do you make of South Garland right now, Devin?
Yeah, you know, in fact, since 2012, they've had 7 wins total in 7 years.
Yeah.
And they've hit that, 2-win plateau. This is now the 3rd time, since their last playoff appearance in 2012. As somebody who, like I've said before, kind of pays a little bit more attention to, even though it's not in our coverage area, I have connections to South Garland through kiddos and whatnot. Yeah. But, Coach Martinez out there really liked kind of the energy he brought last year. This is his 2nd year, but as a first-year coach, you can tell those guys it's frustrating when you're 1-9, when you're 0-10. But those guys still late in the season were playing hard. And I think that's kind of carried over. They've got some talented guys. They just don't have the depth that a lot of other programs do. Jalil Brown, their quarterback, is a kid I really like. He's only 5'9", 165. So he's really a running back also. I mean, he rushed for over 1,300 yards last year. But out of necessity, he also plays quarterback. And he's a guy that they moved him to quarterbacks who'd have the ball in his hands on every snap. And he can make some throws. He's more dangerous on the ground. But, he's got some playmakers around him. Jalen Chambers ran for more than 100 yards last week. Guys on the outside like Jacob Krim, Damon Rout, Davon Gilmore. These are guys that I've seen actually go up and make some plays. The thing is, a lot of these guys are also their best defensive players.
Okay.
And again, when against North Garland last week, these guys were making plays on both sides of the ball. But you wonder against a larger team, because North Garland kind of suffers from those numbers issues as well. You wonder against a program like Sachse, who doesn't have to play guys both ways because they have the depth on both sides of the ball. Even if South Garland's able to, because I think they're going to come out. They're obviously going to come out and play hard. I think Sachse is more vulnerable than they have been in years. A little bit more mistake prone, at least so far this year. Something that South Garland might be able to take advantage of, like they did against North Garland last week, who I believe turned the ball over 4 times, and South Garland took advantage. It's going to be that second half, and especially that fourth quarter, where you kind of wonder, okay, does South Garland really have enough in the tank to stay with it?
In hindsight, I mean, what a hallmark moment that win over Wiley was, because you look at just their woes in district play for quite some time now. They had lost 38 consecutive district ball games prior to beating Wiley. You'd have to go all the way back to when they were that brief stint that they had as a 5A program back in 2014. They beat North Forney 41-10. My, how times have changed.
Yeah. and the thing is, a lot of those games were over by halftime.
Yeah.
So it's just it shows you how Coach Martinez and that staff has kind of brought this program along. And the talent in GIC is cyclical, and maybe it's trending up for South Garland. You never can tell, until it plays out on the field. But just the fact that they've been more competitive, even when they've lost, even if it's early on, some games can get away from you in the second half. Just the fact that they are more competitive than, say 3, 4, 5 years ago, is a big statement for that staff.
And as someone who hasn't seen South Garland play in person, I'm just going off numbers and box scores and whatnot, just what's kind of stood out, at least from my vantage point, in those 2 wins over North Garland and Wiley, was just the second half execution, because they were down at halftime in both of those games, and they had to manufacture some touchdowns in some unconventional ways. Against Wiley, it was a fourth quarter pick 6 by Kadarius Hart that gave them a lead, and then they were able to put that game away for good with a 48-yard touchdown pass from Brown to Tyron Ariane Key for a 35-30 lead. And then against North Garland, they outscored them 21-7 in the second half, and it was Jacob Krim who was kind of the hero in that one. He had 2 touchdown catches, including one that apparently bounced off the helmet of a defender.
Yeah, deflected up in the air, and he. I saw the highlights of it, but apparently it was one of those top area play candidates, and it's just one of those things that when you're playing tough, when you're playing strong, and you're playing with emotion, those things tend to fall your way, and they had the momentum, and that just kind of sealed it for them last week. But again, you got one team on a winning streak, one team on a losing streak. So,
and not the ones that we would have expected.
No.
And they're doing it, despite. So I guess I didn't even see. So they won that game against North Garland despite committing almost 200 yards worth in penalties.
Yeah, that was on both sides. It got a little bit chippy. A lot of personal fouls. A lot of. This was in the first half. The teams, I guess, kind of got talked to at halftime and said, "Hey guys, let's settle this thing down and not let the flags decide it." But there was a lot of penalty yards there in the first half.
Because you look at the wins, and it's the passing game hasn't been the most efficient. They're completing just around 41% of their passes in those 2 wins. But they've at least got enough from the run game. You mentioned Brown, obviously that being more of his forte, and then Chambers in these 2 wins averaging more than 8 yards per carry. The passing game, while it hasn't been the most efficient, though, it's when they are able to throw and catch. Big things are happening. Because against North Garland, Jalil Brown's his yards per completion was 23.4, and then against Wiley it was 12.1. So when they're getting the ball in the hands of players like Key and like Krim, obviously big things are happening there. But I guess so. If you're just kind of looking at just kind of the path to victory for South Garland in this one, Sachse is a bit of a different animal. No matter what they've been through in recent weeks, you mentioned obviously just the size of that program and whatnot. So what do you see as South Garland's best path to an upset in this one?
Avoid the turnovers. Yeah. Cut down. I can't say eliminate penalties, but cut down on the penalties. They're going to have to really play mistake free. I think they're going to have to be with the ball on the ground. Sachse has been susceptible to big plays, and maybe they can hit for a couple, but they've got to establish that ground game first, and that's with Chambers and Jalil Brown, just kind of mixing the 2 of those up, maybe even incorporating those guys on the outside. I know Jacob Krim is capable of coming around maybe on an end around or on a wide receiver screen, but a lot of high percentage, low risk plays early on, and just make Sachse press. That's because I think Sachse is going back to their ground. Between Brian Okoye and Corey Jones, and then Alex Orji on the ground from the quarterback position, they're averaging, the 3 of them are averaging 8 yards a carry. And so I think Sachse is going to kind of stick to that same, hey, I don't want to go high risk and have to try to air it out, because that's where we've gotten ourselves into a little bit of trouble. But if South Carolina is able to maybe take a lead, maybe get up and establish that ground game, control the clock, make Sachse press, that's when they're more prone to make a mistake. And then, crazier things have happened in 2020.
Because that's been at least the one consistent theme in these games against Rowlett and Lakeview, is that Sachse has never really been able to establish any sort of foothold at any juncture in those games. They were kind of on their heels from the get-go, it felt like, in both of them. So I guess let's get to prediction time. So, we just outlined a path to victory for South Garland. Ultimately, do you guys think it'll be enough tonight? David?
I still think Sachse's going to win it, just because it seems like they're a team that's used to the playoffs. They're the team. It's like with the way things are going in the district right now after 2 straight losses. It's like, okay, the desperation is going to kick in. So I feel like Sachse's going to pull it off, and the 2 wins that South Garland had, they're both against the bottom 2 teams in the district right there. So I figured just based on that, I'm going to go with Sachse.
One thing that's, looking at South Garland's 2 wins, one thing that stood out is that they didn't score a single point in the first quarter in either game. Now, again, they were able to execute well enough in the second half, but it's a team that has still needed some time to find a rhythm, and I just don't know if they're going to be afforded that kind of leeway against a team like Sachse. Again, Rowlett and Lakeview did a good job of putting Sachse on their heels in the first half, but just haven't seen enough during this win streak of South Garland's to make me think think that they can follow suit in that. So I too side with the Mustangs to bounce back. I mean, it's just so tough to fathom Sachse losing 3 straight in that district, given what they've shown over the years. So, Devin, are you in concert with that, or just where are you ultimately leaning on this one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, South Garland has certainly what we've talked about, made strides, but, Sachse has been the cream of the crop in GISD for the last few years. I mean, they may not be the best Garland ISD team this year, but they're still, it's hard to see them falling from being undefeated and, district champion, 3-time, district champion to out of the playoffs. I think that a loss like last week is certainly going to be, has been in their ear from the coaching staff for the last several days. I think you'll see a motivated Sachse come out tonight. Again, South Garland won't lack for effort. I just think Sachse is going to have too much for them.
So there you go. A 3-0 ballot in favor of the Sachse Mustangs to get the win tonight against the South Garland Colonels in our game of the week. That one, once again, 7 o'clock tonight at Williams Stadium. Hope it's a good one. We'll see.
I hope it gets played. We still have a few hours to get there. So
yes, that is our game of the week. Obviously, though, there were a few more games that were up for consideration. Some pretty salty matchups elsewhere in the area. So let's give a quick preview and prediction for some of those. Let's talk about the one that I'm going to be at on Friday. This is probably above all else on the schedule this year. This was the one I was looking forward to the most. Friday, 7 o'clock at Eagle Stadium in Allen. Allen versus Denton Guyer. Now, I mean, it's number 4 in the state versus number 11. Without knowing, the rest of the schedule statewide, hard pressed to find a game that's at least, more high profile than this right now. This one's been building for some time, ever since you saw realignment in these two teams who were actually initially supposed to open the season against each other as part of the Tom Landry Classic. They will now square off Friday night for the inside track on first place in 5-6A. Both teams are undefeated in district play. Allen 4-1 on the season. I'm 4-1. I'm 4-0 on the season. Geyer 5-1, I should say, under Rodney Webb. With Allen, I'm anxious to see this just because you obviously Allen had the COVID shutdown. They didn't play a football game for 4 straight weeks. And then you look at what's happened since then, and they've found the win column against McKinney Boyd and Little Elm, but they've been 2 fairly uneven performances, for a program whose, Coach Gamble's, his biggest refrain since the day he was hired was just the need for just consistency. And with Allen, you look at that game against McKinney Boyd, the offense, it took them a little over 3 quarters to get going. It was only a 21-9 lead after 3 quarters. Then they scored 21 in the 4th quarter, blow the game open, 42-9, looks great on paper. And then against Little Elm, the offense has its best game of the year, 68 points, and you'll win every time you score 68. Seems like, but they gave up 44, and I mean, it was a 44 that wasn't like in garbage time. John Mateer was taking it to them from the get-go. They made Little Elm quarterback John Mateer look like Pat Mahomes out there with some of the stuff he was putting up. Almost 500 passing yards. He almost had 100 rushing yards as well. They gave up. I mean, there was a season high in big plays given up by that defense, and it was, certainly a little bit of a. I mean, Little Elm has been, competitive in bursts throughout this season, but certainly not the, nothing had, projected that this would be a showing where they put up 600 yards of offense. I mean, very seldom do you see anybody have a career night at the expense of Allen's defense, and I mean, John Mateer took it to him, so I'm curious to see what that means. Obviously, with Little Elm, I mean, they threw the ball 50 times. Geyer's not going to do that. But just, I mean, it's still such a young season for this Allen team. They were playing just their 4th game of the year against Little Elm. So there is still an element of this Allen team that we kind of don't know a whole lot about. But then you look at a team like Geyer, 5-1 under their new head coach, Rodney Webb. Pretty much since the 2nd quarter of their district opener against McKinney, they've been on fire. It was, ironically enough, they started off district play. It was 21-21 against McKinney through 1 quarter. And then since then, they've outscored the combo of McKinney, Prosper, and Denton Braswell 107-44. Great stuff on both sides of the ball. Just a team loaded in Division I talent with their quarterback, Eli Stowers, committed to Texas A&M, one of the top dual-threat quarterbacks in the state. Got a power running game led by Byron Phillips and a big play receiver out there with Grayson O'Bara. Defensively, I mean, there's just Division I talent in all 3 levels. Whether it's Cooper Lands up front, I believe it's Baylor he might be committed to, and then Jordan Eubanks, Florida State linebacker, and then obviously in the secondary, Deuce Harmon, Texas A&M. I'm anxious to see kind of how they approach it from that that standpoint, how they deploy Deuce Harmon, given Allen's, their other tandem on the outside of the Green twins, Oklahoma State commits Blaine and Bryson Green. How do they use Deuce Harmon to try to counteract that? How does Eubanks and Lance, how do they fare against that explosive Allen run game led by Jordan Johnson and Jalen Jenkins? And then obviously there's the Coach Rodney Webb angle. I mean, one of only 4 head coaches to have a win against Allen since October of 2012. And with him, I mean, you saw the seeds being planted for what a Rodney Webb-led team could do to Allen in, 2018 when they played them in the second round of the playoffs. Allen was able to pull away late, win that game 52-41, but Rockwell gave them all sorts of trouble. And then last season in the second round of the playoffs, Rockwell got the job done 60-59, sent Allen packing and denied them. I guess that was the first time since that 2012 season that Allen didn't get to the state semifinals. So, with Coach Webb, and the talent that he has with Geyer, they look so good last week against Braswell, 49-7 against one of the top offenses in the area. So is this a sign that things are starting to now kind of pick it up as far as them starting to pick up this scheme and starting to kind of hit their stride and realize their potential? As far as a pick for this one, I mean, I hate that we only get to spend just a few minutes on this game, but I mean, there's a lot to like about Geyer in this one. There really is. If you look at just the way that these teams have played recently, I mean, Geyer is playing the more stable brand of football. Again, with Allen, there's no telling how much of the inconsistencies have been related to that time off that they had, but Geyer is playing the more stable brand of football right now, and they've been through some wars that Allen just hasn't up to this point. They went blow for blow with the number 1 ranked team in 5A Division I, Denton Ryan, lost that game 23-20. But then they had to rally in the fourth quarter to come back and beat Prosper on the road 24-23. And now, granted, Allen, there were certainly some uncomfortable moments last week against Little Elm, but nothing to the tune of having to stage a game-winning drive on the road against a state-ranked opponent like Geyer did versus Prosper. And then again, you've got someone on the sidelines who is going to coach with the requisite amount of fearlessness that it takes to beat Allen. I think that is such a massive intangible in this. All that being said, and there's really I'm still going Allen in this one, and I've seen Allen come through in these spots one too many times over the years. I mean, there's the streaks that Allen has, that are in play right now, a 79-game regular season winning streak, which according to Texas High School Football History.com, that's the best ever. They just passed the best ever. Galena Park North Shore, I believe, was 78, and Allen just passed that with that win over Little Elm. So that's the rarefied air that Allen is playing in right now. They have a 62-game district winning streak that dates back to 2010. Haven't lost a district ball game since then. It was actually to Hebron who beat them, and that was also the last time that Allen lost a game at home. They're undefeated in the brand new Eagle Stadium. Now, granted, I don't think home field means as much this year just because of the pandemic and the limited capacity for these stadiums, but just in having covered this Allen team for as long as I have, there have been a number of, big games that have surfaced in the regular season. Now, I do think this is the toughest test as far as that district championship streak goes. But Allen has shown over the years that they are able to elevate their level of play for these games. They get up for games like this, and I've seen it happen one too many times. And I don't think it's going to be easy by any stretch. I think Geyer has a great chance to win this game, a better chance than anybody that Allen has played in district since that 62-game streak began back 10 years ago. But by the slimmest of margins, I'm taking Allen in this one. But I'm the only one sitting here that is.
I guess me and Devin both picked Denton Guyer.
Yes, you both picked Denton Guyer. So, one of y'all just kind of walked you, I guess, from the Denton Guyer side of things. What led y'all to that verdict?
I would say their defense. Mm-hmm. Not like you just mentioned the Division I talent over there. The thing that they can do is they can get after the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like when you have like an offense like Allen's that has General Booty and the way he's connected with the Green Twins right there. This is the one defense that can probably get him out of a rhythm right here. I was looking at this morning. Excuse me. In 6 games they've had 24 sacks.
That's pretty impressive. And
this is just even more impressive. They've had 45 quarterback hurries.
Okay.
So I feel like this is a team that can, take their passing game off their rhythm right there. Just kind of force, Booty into some uncomfortable situations right there. Maybe, get a few sacks of him. Maybe force a turnover as well too. And I think that's the one reason, like this morning, I actually texted you this morning.
Yeah,
I'm like,
this was an 11th hour.
This is 11th hour change right here. Yeah. So I actually texted Matt this morning. I'm like, I just want to change my pick because before today, like I was just going off the mystique of Allen right here. It seems like they can just win big games in big situations, but not only was their defense, but it's just the Rodney Webb factor as well too. You saw what happened in the playoff game last year. I can't remember if you were there.
I was not at that game. No, I was on state volleyball duty that night.
Oh, okay. But I just remember it just seems like Rodney Webb, he just has that pedigree for, throwing Allen off its game right there. And obviously the 60-59 game where they won on a 2-point conversion with literally less than a minute left.
Yeah.
And even the year before that, like when they actually led Allen in the first half, and the only reason I think they kind of lost that game is because Njigba got a little bit shaken up there in the third quarter, and he had to sit out a couple series right there. So I think that kind of took them off the rhythm. But I feel like it seems like big game Webb. It seems like he just knows how to figure out a way to just, take away their strengths right there. So I feel like, especially that one, and also the turnover on Allen's defense right there, this coming up this season, because I think they only had one returning starter. Yeah. So, I mean, it feels like over the last couple of years, Allen's been able to outscore people, but it feels like that you can only do that for so long. And I feel like Geyer, with the pedigree that they have, not only on defense, but the way they run the ball right there, I feel like they're going to pull out the victory.
Yeah, curious to see, because Allen's offense has scored at least 40 points in every game this season. So, yes, this is obviously the toughest defensive test that they've gone up against so far. So, yes, a 2-1 ballot in favor of Denton Guyer to score the win over Allen Friday in one of the most high-profile games in the state. Let's look at another high-profile game. This one, however, in District 7 5A Division 2. Some nice backstory between these two teams. Frisco makes the trip to face Denison. This one Friday, 7 o'clock out at Munson Stadium in Denison. Like I said, there's some history there. Denison is the last team to defeat Frisco in district play. This one was a bit of an oddball, 10-7. Not exactly the kind of score you come to associate with modern-day Texas high school football. But yes, that is what it took to subdue Frisco last season. Devin, just kind of talk a bit about this matchup and ultimately where you're leaning on this one.
I mean, I think it's going to be a good game. I think, Denison, Frisco comes in with the state ranking, but, Denison's 4-2. You look at that, one of those losses is to Texas High, who's state ranked and undefeated. Yeah. And their other loss was to Lovejoy, who they played tough. So, it's going to be a close game. Frisco is just so methodical. Their defense is so good. I mean, they're allowing less than 10 points a game. They got the playmakers in the secondary with Chase Lowry, obviously, with 4 interceptions. Miles Mays has 3 interceptions. AJ Yasili, Drew Johnson, guys like that are just, tackling machines. They're just so solid across the board. And it allows their offense to kind of do its methodical thing. They don't have to press. They average less than 10 pass attempts per game. Curry Green doesn't have to do a lot, but when he does throw the ball, it's been effective. I mean, he goes basically, nearly 25 yards of completion. It helps when you have Chase Lowry out there averaging nearly 30 yards a catch.
No doubt.
But what they really like to do is pound the ball, control the clock with guys like Bradford Martin. Who, even if the defense knows he's getting the ball, he's still averaging 10 yards a carry. AJ Janana, they got their formula. They've got their method. And the other team knows what they're going to do. It's just how can you move the ball in that defense, and how can you slow down that offense in that ground game? And really no one's been able to do it so far. Denison, it'll be interesting to see how they do it. They would prefer to control the clock on their own with guys like Jadarian Price and Asa Osborne. But again, they've got the offense going the last couple of weeks, but it's been against, kind of the bottom tier of that district. One thing about Denison is in their games, 6 games so far, they do have 13 takeaways. So if they can get a couple takeaways, I think that's going to be a necessary ingredient to pulling off. I wouldn't call it a huge upset, but it'll be a mild upset if they were able to knock Frisco off. But as you saw last year, they kind of followed that same formula to victory last year. Keep it low scoring, control the game with their own rushing attack. So it ought to be, it ought to be a close one. But I just think Frisco, the way they've been playing so far this year, again, assuming they avoid those turnovers and stick to their game plan, I think Frisco moves on, remains undefeated.
I'm curious to see the kind of strides that Frisco's passing game makes in this one. You mentioned, obviously, it's not a high-volume passing attack by any stretch, but it was an area where they really struggled in last year's matchup. Yeah. Just 2 of 18 through the air in that game. Yeah. And granted, their defense played outstanding, even in defeat. They held Price Osborne and their quarterback, Caleb Hefner, to a combined, 2.9 yards per carry. So, I mean, they were effective in that respect. But again, I think, a year older, Kari Green in the offense, I expect them to generate a bit more this time around. And I am curious to see that just because, that Denison defense, they've already shown, Lovejoy, you look how Lovejoy has just been rolling up points on everybody, and then they had to mount a fourth quarter comeback there against Denison. Denison did a really good job making Lovejoy sweat in that game. So this one could be sneaky close for sure. But I like Frisco to get the job done as well. And so does David. We're unanimous in this one. We like the Frisco Raccoons to remain undefeated on the season in pursuit of back-to-back district championships and avenge their loss last year to Denison on Friday. Let's look at another game in District 5-6A. This one, part of the kind of that log jam right now for the we feel like, again, we've got the those top 3 seeds in some order are going to be Allen, Geyer, and Prosper. 4th seed is just a complete it's a mess right now. But this is one of the games that's going to add a little bit of clarity to it. McKinney travels to Denton to face Braswell. This one Friday, 7 o'clock at C.H. Collins Stadium. 2 teams that are very, very different in terms of just stylistic profiles. McKinney's offense looking to get on track a bit. It's been a pretty uneven year. They're averaging just under 24 points per game. I think back even as early as their opener against Plano, and they came out and looked so incredible for the first quarter and a half, led 21-0. And then someone just shut the water off in the second half, and they just couldn't get anything going. They needed some miracle play on special teams, and then a 2-point conversion to persevere in that one and win 36-35. And they've had moments where it just hasn't really clicked yet on offense. And they've got that power running game though with R.J. Carver, and that's one thing where if you look at Braswell, because Braswell is, the offensive numbers they put up are just staggering. Almost 40 points per game, and it's insane too because they're averaging almost 40 points per game. And that is with 2 games on their record of 14 points or less.
I was about to say it's kind of feast or famine.
Yeah.
Geyer, I get.
Boyd,
12 points against Boyd, I didn't really.
Boyd's defense is sneaky decent.
And not to take anything with Boyd, but if you just look at those gaudy numbers across the balance, just all the way across the board, I was sitting there going, okay, this is going to be an easy pick. I'm picking Braswell.
Yeah.
I started thinking about it.
Boyd's got a solid front 7. 14 points is not what I would have expected, but I'm not surprised that they held him well under what they're capable of. But but Braswell will give up a lot of points as well, though.
Yeah.
So they're averaging almost 40 a game, but they're giving up almost 45 a game. So if there is an opportunity for McKinney to right the ship, this would seem to be the matchup. The one thing about that Boyd game that stands out is, in addition to what the defense did, they also did a great job just controlling the clock in that game and just limiting the snaps for that Braswell offense. And when you look at McKinney with R.J. Carver and that power running game, what they're capable of, I think that's a recipe that they can potentially have some success with. Despite these 2 teams being so different stylistically, I do think that McKinney at least has the more reliable brand just because of what they can do on defense as well. Again, for as much as the offense has been trying to find its footing, the defense held Marcus, who's just looks like an absolute world beater right now in 6-6A. They held them to their lowest output of the season, 27 points. They held a Skyline team that's looked like they're treading towards being a playoff team in 10-6A to just 13. Prosper only had 27 last week on them, so they can play some pretty solid defense in McKinney too. So I think that that's going to be the difference in this one. I like them to get the win against Braswell. How about you, David?
Did I pick Braswell?
Let's pull it up and see. Either way, you sound incredibly confident.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Well, you did pick Braswell, so
I did pick Braswell.
Try to find a way to rationalize that now that you're aware that you picked them.
The spot's on me right here. Well, McKinney, they've had some good spurts in offense right there, but the consistency with Braswell's offense right there to be able to put up that many points, I feel like McKinney can be able to get some yardage with R.J. McKinney, but the passing game for McKinney is just kind of hit or miss sometimes. So that's the reason why I feel like I'm going to go with Braswell in this game.
So, yes.
What I had said earlier, I said I looked at their stats and I'm picking Braswell. I didn't, in fact, though, pick Braswell. I picked McKinney because I know better than to get caught up in the numbers and the hype. And it's real easy because, again, those are sexy numbers. Mm-hmm. Those are incredible numbers. But when you get down to what they've done against quality teams, and like you mentioned, McKinney, I think that win over Skyline is impressive. That's a win that's really aged well. Yeah. And if you look at spurts, not the entire 4 quarters, but spurts against two really good teams in Geyer and Prosper, they played even up really well. So I think, like you mentioned, the defense, I think I did, in fact. Just to go on the record, since I said Braswell was going to win earlier, I got to clarify and say I actually did pick McKinney to win.
A 2-1 ballot in favor of the McKinney Lions to beat the Braswell Bengals in a pivotal matchup over in 5-6A. Let's close out with a pivotal matchup in 7-5A Division I, a battle of the 2 remaining unbeatens in that district. McKinney North travels to Highlander Stadium to take on number 2 ranked Highland Park. With McKinney North, we talked about them on Monday's podcast and just some of the unconventional ways in which they figured out they've just maneuvered their way to a 3-0 start in district play, whether it was getting the non-offensive touchdowns and that win over Tyler to an intentional grounding call on West Mesquite being the what was able to help allow the Bulldogs to hang on for a 35-32 victory, and then just that great second half that they played against Wiley East, and they have found ways to generate points beyond their offense, which is that's a valuable intangible, especially in games like this where you're probably going to need some scores that are a little bit unconventional to keep pace. But at the end of the day, with Highland Park, I'm a simple man, Devin. I see Highland Park's playing a game at home. I pick them to win that game at home. I mean, they've only lost one time to a team in Texas at home since 1998, and again, it was a special team with Frisco Lone Star last year that went on to make it to the state semifinals, was number 1 ranked in the state most of the year. So, yes, I just because of, again, and I said earlier that I don't think home field means as much this year because of pandemic reasons, but how can you go against that history that's in Highland Park's favor in this one?
We really can. You talked a little about the Allen, the mystique. Well, I mean, Highland Park has that same mystique, and they've had it longer.
Yes,
there's just something longer about going to Highlander Stadium and covering games over the years, and talking to coaches down on the field before the games, and it's something that they address their players, but there's just something odd about that walking in there. McKinney North has been a nice little story
for sure. They're going to be a playoff team in that district.
Oh yeah,
looks like.
It looks like they are because again they have 3 key tiebreaker wins, but again the 3 teams they've beaten have a combined 2-14 record. So they're stepping into an entirely different class of team. This is a Highland Park team that beat Rockwall 46-18 early in the season, and that's just
God. They did. Jeez, I completely forgot.
Yeah,
about that.
I mean it's just, and so that shows their potential right there with Braden Shager and that group of receivers. They go on the road last week and beat Longview. You talk about places with mystique, Lobo Stadium. 18-13 in a defensive, slugfest. So they showed they could do it in that respect as well. 18 carries for 24 yards on the ground last week is a little bit of a concern. Mm-hmm. I just think that passing game is so good. I don't think they'll have the same difficulties, even though they don't have a go-to running back at this time. McKinney North is not Longview on defense. It's like you say, if it's Highland Park and it's at Highlander Stadium, it's a pretty easy pick.
So yes, it was a 3-0 ballot in favor of the Highland Park Scots to defeat McKinney North in this game. Friday, 7:30 out at Highlander Stadium. And, that is at least the marquee games that were up for consideration for Game of the Week this week. Let's quickly go through the rest of the picket line, talk about just some quick picks for a few of the other games that are up for consideration. Speaking of District 5-6A, the other game that should add a little bit of clarity to the logjam for 4th place in that district, McKinney-Boyd versus Little Elm. We're all picking Little Elm, fresh off a spirited showing against Allen. We'll see. Hopefully it's not the Jekyll and Hyde showing from Little Elm, given that the clunker they had against Braswell early on. But we like the Lobos to get the win over McKinney-Boyd in that one. You've got some rivalry action in but Mesquite ISD this week with that's right. Yeah, that's right. They got COVIDed. So yeah, Nick's it's
the 51st installment will have to wait till December 5th.
It always happens, man. It feels like the last 3 weeks we've had at least one game on the picket line that falls through after the fact. So we'll pick up with you later on in the season. Mesquite North Mesquite. Some action then over over in District 6A with Plano East and Flower Mound. Somebody's O's got to go. Both are 0-3 in district play. This one, though, had a split ballot. Devin, let's see. Devin's going with Plano East. David, you
again.
You were going to die on that hill this season. And then, David, you and I going with the Flower Mound Jaguars to get the win here. This one gave me some trouble just because after seeing them against Plano West, I'm curious to see if there is a move coming at quarterback with Plano East. So that could be something that kind of swings the scales in their favor in this one, given the lack of film on Harris Boyd. But nevertheless, though, yes, we are. Me and David are going with Flower Mound in this one. Plano West and Marcus is another big one. That one over at Clark Stadium. Marcus has just been outstanding this season, and we'll see if Plano West defense can offer up any resistance. We, the three of us, don't see it. We all pick Marcus to get the win and remain undefeated on the season. We have a private school game that materialized kind of out of thin air here. This game was initially canceled earlier on due to COVID reasons, but it has since been rescheduled. Prestonwood and John Paul II. If I wasn't at Alan Geyer, this is the game where I'd be. I was really looking forward to the game this year. Shame they happen to schedule it on, it's the biggest regular season game of the year for in my coverage area. So, but nevertheless, though, we all like John Paul II to get the win over Prestonwood. I believe that would be their first ever win over Prestonwood in football. So some history on the line there between the Lions and Cardinals. So yes, your quick picket line standings before we close up shop here. Devin 44-22 on the season. David 46-20. I'm at 51-15. So we'll see what is in store. But that is a look at kind of where we are as far as some of the marquee games in our coverage area for the week. And that'll do it for this episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. We'll be back on Monday to kind of do the same thing we did on Monday, except we're going to do a bit of a stock check on Class 6A. So we'll see. Obviously, a lot of big things happening in 6A this week. So some shakeup is bound to take place. So we'll be back on Monday to discuss that. Until then, folks, take care, and we will talk to you all later.